purpose of this video is to make sure that we're understanding all of the concepts from Unit 2 before the test. If you haven't taken this, if you haven't done this Unit 2 concepts worksheet, go ahead and do that worksheet before you start working on, before you watch this video, because this video is going to go over all of the solutions. And the way that this worksheet is designed, it's not going to be very useful to you if you haven't tried to see what misconceptions that you have. We're going to go over misconceptions, we're going to go over the solutions, and then I'm going to give you recommendations based on what your specific answer is. So if you haven't looked at it, go ahead and pause the video and fill out that worksheet and then come back to the video. Alright, so number one, what is the relationship between -5 to the 4th power and -5 to the 4th power? So these are, when it's spoken, these are said in exactly the same way, -5 to the 4th power. The difference is that this one does not have parentheses and this one has parentheses. And we really need to understand whether or not this negative sign is a part of the base. And it's only part of the base, meaning the base of this exponent right here. It's only part of what is being raised to the 4th power if it's in the parentheses. So in this first example, this 5 is the only thing that is being raised to the 4th power. So it's understood that we're only dealing with this portion right here. So we are raising 5 to the 4th power. We're doing that first, and then we're taking the opposite of that. That's how this one is understood. That's what this one is understood to mean. So this will give us a negative number. No matter what this exponent is, we will have a negative number at the very end. It will go on the left side of the number line. This one, on the other hand, the negative is on the inside. So the way this is interpreted, we're taking -5 and we're multiplying it by itself 4 times. So depending on what the exponent is, we will have a negative number or a positive number. So we'll go more into that later. But the way that we're going to figure out what's supposed to go in this blank is to figure out what -5 to the 4th power is. Let's see, 5 to the 4th power is 625, and then this negative sign is going to make it a -625. On the other hand, this -5 in parentheses to the 4th power is going to be positive 625. If we take a negative times a negative, we get a positive. If we multiply by another negative, we get a negative, and then another negative ultimately makes our number positive. So this is positive 625, this is a negative 625. So on this line, you should have that they are opposites of each other, or something to that effect. Opposites. If you wrote there negatives of each other, that's the idea. The vocabulary word that we're looking for on that one is opposites. So you need to understand that one is going to be negative, the other is going to be positive in this case. Number 2 is closely tied to that. The relationship between 5 to the -4th power. Let's see, let's evaluate -5 to the 4th power. Or I'm sorry, 5 to the -4th power. 5 to the -4th power is going to be equal to, let's see, we have 5 to the -4th. If we have a negative power, what that means is we take the reciprocal of the base. So we need to identify what the base is. I'm going to underline the base in blue. This part right here is the base. So we're going to take 1/5 and we're going to raise that, our base, to the, used to be a -4th power, but we spent that negative sign making it into the reciprocal, making the base the reciprocal. So now it's 1/5 to the positive 4th power. Whenever we take the reciprocal, we take the opposite of the exponent. That's what that negative in the exponent means. It means something completely different from what it did in the first example. This one, it's part of the coefficient. On this one down here, it's part of the exponent. They do completely different things. They look kind of similar, but they mean completely different things. So now all that's left is to represent this as 1 over, if I raise this to the -5th power, or I'm sorry, to the 4th power, I'm going to get 1 over 625. And as we saw above, we already know that 5 to the 4th power is 625. So if I compare this 625 to 1 over 625, I see that those are reciprocals of each other. Now, in this first example, these are not always going to be opposites of each other. It's going to depend on several factors. Are there parentheses, which is what you were trying to see here, but also on what the exponent is. If it's an even number, it's going to be the positive version if it has parentheses, and if it doesn't have parentheses and it's an even number, it'll change. So this is not always going to be true, that if there are parentheses, the sign's going to change. However, this one, if there's something with the same base raised to the negative power and raised to the positive version of that power, they are always, always, always going to be reciprocals of each other. That will never change. This is always going to be true. Number three is just making sure that we understand that this negative part, even though it's raised to a power, it's different from the situation in number 1. Number 1, we had an even power. Number 3, we have an odd power. So what this means, if I expand this out, and you can do this on a quiz or a test if you're unsure, if I raise this to the 7th power, I get negative 2 times 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 negative 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need one more, negative 2. And I can go through, and you're allowed a different color on the quizzes and tests also. This is a negative number to start out with. It's a negative 2. And then this will make it into a positive number, then a negative number, then a positive number, negative number, positive number, and ultimately this is going to be a negative number. So this is going to be negative 628. This should be on this part of the number line. So if we have 0 here, it should be on the negative side rather than the positive side. That's what you were supposed to see on number 3. On number 4, what are the factors that can determine whether a number is positive or negative? So we're talking the overall result. Is the overall result negative or positive? So kind of like what we saw in number 1, the overall result could be negative or positive depending on whether or not there are parentheses. So we just saw if the number has a negative sign in the coefficient, it can affect it. If we have negative 5 to the 7th power, that's going to be a negative number. And if we have 5 to the 7th power, that's going to be a positive number. So this can definitely affect whether or not our result is negative or positive. The number has a negative sign in the exponent. Well, let's take a look at number 2 again. The only difference between 5 to the negative 4th and 5 to the 4th is that they're reciprocals of each other. And again, they will always be reciprocals of each other. So since they're always reciprocals of each other, and reciprocals of the same number have the same sign, if I take negative 1/2 and I take the reciprocal of it, the reciprocal is going to be negative 2, or negative 2 over 1. So these will have the same sign. This should be empty. This does not affect whether or not the number is negative or positive. You don't need to even factor this in when you're trying to figure out, should my number be negative or positive? It's going to match whatever, it's not going to affect it at all. If the number is parentheses, well, we just saw that. This is going to be a negative 10,000, and this is going to be a positive 10,000. You can expand it out, kind of like what we did with number 3. If you expand it out, that's going to be negative, and this is going to be positive. So this will definitely affect, it can affect what sign we have. The number has a positive or a negative exponent. Again, we just talked about that. Same situation as up here. This same situation applies. This 3 right here will not affect whether it's negative or positive. This negative 3 will not affect whether it's negative or positive. This negative 3 here just means that I take the reciprocal of 8, which is 1 over 8, and then I'm going to raise that to the 3rd power. So so the exponent will never ever determine whether or not it's positive or negative. at least whether it's negative or the exponent will not determine whether it's negative or positive based on whether the exponent itself is negative or positive. Wow. That should have been open. That should not have been checked. Okay, the number has an odd or an even exponent. This one definitely does matter. If we expand this out, remember that we got a negative number for this one. This one's going to be negative. However, we're going to have on this one, we're going to have a negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times, let's go this way, negative 2, that's 4, 5, and 6. So this is going to be, it's going to be overall positive because we start with a negative, turns into a positive, negative, positive, negative, and positive again. This one, if we add on another negative 2, okay, if we do this, this negative 2 is going to turn it back into a negative number. So this one is going to be negative, and then this one is going to be a positive. So they're going to have opposite signs. So this one definitely has the ability to affect whether it's negative or positive. So these are the three things that determine whether or not the number is going to be a positive or a negative power. So these are the only three things you need to worry about. So if you're going through a mental checklist on a test, go through these things. Does it have a negative sign in the coefficient? If it's not negative, it's not going to be a negative number. Is the number in the parentheses, does it have parentheses at all? If it doesn't have parentheses at all, this is on the outside, we know for certain it's going to be a negative number. And then, is the number in the exponent an odd or an even number? It doesn't matter if it's negative or positive up there, but it does matter if it's odd or even. And remember that 0 is an even number. So 0, anything raised to the 0 except for 0 will be 1, which is a positive number. Evaluate each of the following. Number 5. This is supposed to show you when you combine the things from number 4, what happens. So if we take negative 3 raised to the 4th power, let's see, let's go through this little checklist. Is there a negative sign in the coefficient? Yeah, there's a negative sign here. We could think of that as a coefficient or not. The number does have parentheses, so we need to watch out. The number is even, so that means that it's going to switch from odd to even again. This is going to be, it's going to change from negative to positive, negative to positive. This is going to be an overall positive number. So this is going to be 81. The next one, it does not have parentheses. This 3 is being raised to the 4th power, so this is going to be a negative 81. 3 to the 4th power is 81. And then we save this negative sign to the very end, negative 81. This negative sign is always evaluated in the multiplication step of order of operations. So exponents take priority over that negative sign. The next one, negative 3 is being raised to the 3rd power. So it's we know this is going to be a 27. No matter what, 3 to the 3rd power is 27. Now if I multiply a negative times a positive times a negative, that will make my number overall negative. And this one, without the parentheses, I know this is going to be a negative number. And then 3 to the 3rd power is 27. So these two happen to be the same because we had an odd exponent. We had an odd exponent, which made it a negative number. All of these are oriented toward making sure that we understand the difference between positive and negative numbers and the relationship between negative numbers, negative exponents, and positive exponents. If you struggled with 1 through 5, what you need to do is you need to find the place in your notes titled negative exponents and make sure you know these things. You can make flashcards for these. So number 5 especially has some good examples of things that you could do to make flashcards. You can make a flashcard of negative 3 raised to the 4th power with parentheses and 1 raised to it without parentheses. Have somebody quiz you and make sure that you can do these. You can evaluate these on a program like Wolfram Alpha, and it'll tell you here's what you should have gotten. Be very careful with your parentheses. Make sure the printout looks like how you typed it in.